Hello, this is Gihan Pereira. I want to talk today about what lies ahead for Australian businesses in 2022. Now, of course, we've had yet another year of massive change and disruption in all areas of our society. But what do Australian business leaders say are going to be their biggest challenges in the year ahead? And this is based on a report that KPMG has just recently published. It's called Keeping Us Up at Night, and it asks Australian leaders, business leaders, what are your biggest challenges? It's a report that KPMG has been running for a few years now, and at the start of every year they ask leaders, what are you going to be your biggest challenges? And for the first time this year they've expanded it beyond just the C-suite, but also include non-executive directors and emerging leaders as well. So they get a wider range of opinions. And I want to share with you the top 4 biggest challenges that Australian business leaders identified that they will be facing in the next year. And then you can read the report for more details. So let's go through them. In fact, I'm going to go through them in reverse order. So we'll move up from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. Okay, so the first one is digital transformation. And in fact, for the first 3 years that KPMG ran this report leading up to COVID-19, digital transformation was number 1 on the list. Now, a couple of other things have bumped it down a little bit, but as you'll see, there's a digital thread that runs through all of the 4 challenges, and digital transformation is now number 4. The way that it came out in the report, which 40% of the leaders, the respondents said, is that they were talking about the challenge of digital transformation, optimization, and most importantly, making sure that there's organizational value as a result of the transformation. So in other words, it's not just digital for the sake of being digital, but it's digital because it actually creates value for the organization. So this is not only KPMG that's saying that. There's been a lot of research saying that as a result of the pandemic, digital transformation and digital shift has been accelerated, not just slowed down. So Macquarie says here that most senior leaders said that they had to make significant technology changes as a result of the pandemic. Here's something else from McKinsey saying that lots of organizations used artificial intelligence and automation to allow them to operate effectively in the pandemic. And I work with a lot of teams and leaders and organizations, and the biggest challenge that they have is just making sure that they can get their people on board. Digital transformation is first about people and then about technology, and it's bringing your people along on the journey. So that was number 4. And number 3 on the list of biggest challenges for Australian leaders is what I call distributed teams, what the survey calls working remotely. So the challenge was the challenges and the benefits, being able to reap the benefits of having your employees working remotely. Now, personally, I don't like that term working remotely. It seems to imply that people who aren't working in the office are second-class citizens, and that doesn't have to be the case. But almost 50% of leaders said that that was one of their biggest challenges. And of course, the pandemic made that mainstream for organizations who had knowledge workers who work in an office. The pandemic allowed them to work from home, and now many of them want to continue that. And there's a real challenge for leaders and managers who are trying to manage that. In fact, one of the biggest dangers is still thinking of the office as the main place where work gets done. Early in the pandemic, after a first lockdown, when office workers were gradually and slowly moving back into their offices, I saw a whole bunch of reports and advice and white papers about bringing people back to the workplace and things like this. And the problem with this is they're talking about returning to the workplace. They should have been saying returning to the office, because as soon as you say returning to the workplace, it automatically elevates the office as being the main workplace, and it doesn't have to be that way. And progressive companies are already thinking about what their workplace for the future might look like. One of them is Siemens, a client of mine, and they announced early in the pandemic, when people were still in lockdown in Europe, they announced that all of their office workers could, from that point on, negotiate and coordinate with their managers and their teams to work 2 to 3 days a week away from the office. Now, at the time, away from the office simply meant working from home, but Siemens was saying you can work from anywhere for pretty much half of your working week, because they said, we empower our people and we trust them to get the work done, and we know that if we give them the goals, to achieve, and we give them the right skill set, then we don't mind where they work and when they work, as long as the work gets done. And this is quite a progressive view, but many organizations are thinking that way. They're looking at the workplace not as, like, if you like, one word, but as two separate things. There's a work that needs to get done, and there's a place where that happens. And in the future, the post-pandemic workplace, the best organizations are going to have these fluid teams, which vary in three dimensions. So first of all, where does the work get done? And we've seen for the last couple of years, organizations have been wrestling with that. The next one is, when does the work get done? It doesn't have to be Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, in the same time zone as everybody else. We could have people with completely flexible time schedules, and then that just gets managed as a team. And the last thing is, who actually does the work? Can you bring in freelancers for a project, or contractors, or somebody else from a branch on the other side of the world who you're going to bring in for a particular project because they've got certain skills? So that's what we're going to see for people who really embrace this idea of distributed teams. Okay, we're up to number 2, and it's cybersecurity. Security, of course, is really important, and we all know the importance of it in our increasingly digital world. And the KPMG respondents said this is our number 2 biggest challenge, being able to deal with cyber vulnerability. And this is not just KPMG reporting on Australian business leaders. This is true around the world as well. And the World Economic Forum said that cyber attacks are among the top 10 global risks. Not just global business risks, but global risks. So right up there with things like climate change and war and terrorism and political instability and global supply chains. Cyber attacks are right up there among that. And organizations increasingly realize that they need to be very strong and very proactive in managing their cybersecurity. I saw one research survey that said that almost 70% of organizations said that AI, artificial intelligence, is an essential component of their defense against cyber attacks. I look at that and I think, well, yes, and I feel sorry for the 31% of organizations who don't think that, because it's absolutely essential. And not surprisingly and pleasingly, I'm pleased to see that organizations are taking it seriously. Okay, I should have said, drum roll please. The biggest challenge that Australian business leaders say they will face in 2022 is about talent. It's about having digital savvy people. The way the survey put it was, it's all about how do you get, keep, and get people skilled for a more digitized future. And if you remember, the other three, the number 2, 3, and 4, were around about the 40 to 50%. This one was a whopping 70% of Australian business leaders said this is a major challenge for them. And I do want to point out that when you think about what a more digitized future looks like, it's more than just technology. So it's not just about hiring more IT people. Obviously, technology is a big part of that more digitized future. But if you think about what technology enables and what that means for your workplaces, for your employees, for your customers and your other stakeholders, it broadens the scope of that. So things like consumer behavior has changed. There are people who only want to engage with you on their smartphones through an app. They certainly don't want to call a call center. They don't want to use email. They definitely don't want to come to a branch or to a retail outlet. Ownership, the concept of ownership has changed. So if you've got a whole stack of CDs or you've got a whole stack of DVDs, well, that's what ownership's about. But now, of course, we don't need that because we subscribe to services like Spotify or Apple Music for music. We subscribe to services like Netflix for other streaming media. And that also works at a bigger scale. So I grew up knowing that I wanted to buy a car because a car was essential. But that doesn't have to be the case in the future, which with so many ride-sharing services that are enabled through digital, and maybe in the future we'll have fleets of self-driving cars that we'll be able to call up whenever we need them. Another area is marketing, which used to be traditional media was mass broadcast marketing. Now, of course, it's much more targeted, niched social media influence rather than mass broadcast marketing. We can look at diversity and inclusion, which have become really hot topics in the last few years. And that's because digital technology has allowed marginalized people to collaborate, to connect, and to have influence in other parts of society. And this is as a result of digital enabling that. And of course, we talked about flexible work already, being able to work remotely or having distributed teams. You need that digital infrastructure to allow that to happen. Okay, so in summary, here are the top 4 challenges again. We'll go from 1 to 4 this time. So number 1, being able to acquire and upskill our digital savvy talent. The next one is cybersecurity. The next one is the idea of distributed teams or working remotely. And the last one is digital transformation. I wonder, if you look at your organization, what would you say are your biggest challenges? And there are quite a few that didn't make those lists of the top 4. And you think about things like climate change and sustainability, organizations with purpose and meaning, having more diverse teams, especially in senior leadership, and a whole bunch of other things, which are really important issues that are facing Australian workplaces and workplaces everywhere. Now, it's not that those aren't important, it's just that those weren't within the top 4 of this report. And I encourage you to download the report. It's easy to find and it's free. So all you do is Google KPMG Keeping Us Up at Night and have a look, because all of these others did appear as well. They just weren't in the top 4. But it's worth looking at those top 4 as a starting point and ask yourself, how are we doing as a team and an organization in these 4 areas? And you'll notice there's a common thread of digital that runs through all of them. And it's not surprising, because our world is getting more digital. I'd love to work with you and help you in these areas. I work with lots of leaders and organizations in some of these topics. Cybersecurity is not a specific area of expertise of mine, but other things like the way the workplace is changing, becoming more digital. I've got a keynote called Accelerating Digital, another one called Reimagining the Workplace, and a whole bunch of other in-depth services that I can offer to help you and your team and your organization. So if you'd like to engage with me, go to gihanperera.com. You can find out about my keynote topics, my in-depth masterclasses, what I can do with your strategic planning, which is to give you a futuristic lens that you can then feed into your ongoing planning. And I've got some leadership programs as well. They're all available at gihanperera.com. My last message to you, don't wait for everything to be perfect. Don't wait for all your ducks to line up in a row. We know that's not going to happen. It's not going to happen anytime in the near future. So start before you're ready, because the world won't wait for you. Love to have a conversation with you. All my contact details are available at my website. In the meantime, stay safe and healthy, and I'll see you in the future.